And so here we go. So welcome. So for you, Johan, and you, Larry, just so you know, we're getting to the very end of the unopened gift. So we're on the next to the last session. And let me share with you sort of how things have evolved. Everything has been recorded. So if you, I will get the link and send it, but for the recording, for the all of the sessions, they're all recorded. They're all available to you to take a look at. So you'll notice this says June 2nd, and that's because last week, if you recall, we started this conversation about emotions in the wide world and we didn't finish. So we're going to finish that today and talk about the conclusion. And then next week, we're going to talk about the dictionary that shows up at the back with the 250 emotions in it. Welcome, Marie. Okay, so just so
Hi.
everybody's Hi, just so everybody's aware. So we do record. We are sharing these. We don't allow transcription apps to visit us, so those are not welcome here. And what I'd invite you to do is, if you have a thought, have an idea, have a question, is please bring it to the whole group because I think that enriches the conversation. So here's what we've done. We went through session one. We talked about the book, why, where did it come from, how did it develop, what's it like to write a book. Number two, laid the foundation for this new interpretation of emotions. It's logical, rational, practical, and how it might be different. And in session three, we talked more about that. It's like, well, let's look at these 60 or so emotions and just reconsider how we understand them traditionally, what our interpretation has been, and how maybe there might be something missing from some of those. And then in session four, we talked about emotional clusters and why those are important. And in five, we explored something that Lucy and I termed not quite emotions because, well, they're kind of emotional indicators. They kind of point to emotions, but many emotions could produce that experience. The most common of these that I always hear is overwhelm, because overwhelm is sometimes thought of as an emotion, but we would say, well, it's not an emotion proper because several emotions can provoke that experience that we call overwhelm. And in six, we talked about navigating emotions. What does that mean, and how do we shift emotions? And then we started in daily life, like how do they show up in everything that happens during our day? And then we got to this, emotions in the wider world. So here's what we talked about last time. Whoops. We talked about how emotions are part of organizations. We talked about how emotions are key in leadership, how emotions are fundamental to politics, how emotions are at the core of science, and how emotions live have been put into the domain of psychology. And that's where we often have to go look to find them. But in fact, there are other ways to think about emotions. So I'd like to finish the list, and these are all sections in the chapter. So you can read this in the chapter as well. And again, this is a conversation. So if you've read this and you have questions, let's talk about them. You didn't come just to hear me talk. So one thing, I think we might have talked about this. Did we talk about money last time? Does that look familiar? Okay. So here's something I heard in a financial planning class once with a woman who was a wonderful financial planner and a wonderful coach. And she said, you know what? If you guys aren't good at math, it doesn't matter because your financial planning is 90% emotions and 10%, 90% emotions and 10% arithmetic, and anybody can do the arithmetic. It's easy. And that was a real wake up for me. I had no idea. It never occurred to me that so many of my financial choices are emotionally based. Hi, Vaughn. Welcome. And Jennifer. So for me, that has really changed the way I see finance. And now we can extend that to, the stock market. We can extend it to the economy. We can extend it lots of places. But I thought this was fascinating, this idea that, oh, so I'm making financial choices based on fear or excitement or envy or greed or, there's some emotion at the root of that financial choice. And even if I'm avoiding balancing my checkbook, oh, now we're talking denial. So there's lots and lots of emotions that we can see connected with money. So for me, this seems to be completely true in my experience. And I think about this sometimes, right? Before I buy something, then I start thinking, well, okay, not do I need it or not, but okay, what's the emotion that's provoking me to make this transaction? So it's fascinating. I think organized religion, big place for emotions. And I grew up with a father who was a pastor, was a Protestant minister. And he was very ecumenical, so he wasn't ultra conservative. But I just noticed I went to every kind of church imaginable when I was growing up, as well as, Jewish synagogues and Greek Orthodox churches, because he always went as a visiting minister. So he would go and preach, he would give the sermon, and of course, we got to go with him because we were his family. But one of the things I notice is, how emotions are so at core, and emotions like faith, of course, right? We believe without evidence. We don't need evidence. We choose to believe. But also, there's some other emotions like adoration. And I know from spending time in Catholic churches, there's adoration of the saints, and these emotions are really at the core. And some people will tell you, I didn't have this experience so much, but some people will tell you, well, you know what? Shame. Shame's there too. Why? Because you do something wrong that's against the rules. Everybody wants you to know. Everybody wants you to feel badly about it because why? Well, because that's not following the norms of the community. So shame, guilt, right? Embarrassment, all of these emotions show up there. But so do emotions like affection, like the people in the congregation. And also things like curiosity, like, okay, so where did all this come from? I think there's no limit to the emotions that may come up for you when you're having when you're involved with any type of religion, and I would extend it to other practices like Buddhism. And, so again, any type of organized recognition of deities or something beyond human, I would say absolutely includes and is probably even based on emotions. Advertising and marketing, one of my favorites, and I love watching commercials for this because they're always saying things like emotion and emotion. That's a Peugeot car line. But all of them, you think about them, and even the ones that don't mention emotions, like Nike, just do it. Well, there's an emotion there. Like, what is that emotion? Is it boldness? Is it exuberance? What is that? And so I find this to be really fascinating to watch. Here in Spain, we haven't already had this conversation, have we? Have we? Did we? Did we? Okay.
Yes, yeah, we
Well,
talked about the advertising piece.
oh my gosh. So you're hearing this twice. Okay. So did we talk about consumerism? Yeah. And did we talk about culture? Yeah. And did we talk about competitive sports? We did all of these? Okay. So here's what I'm going to ask you. So as you've reflected on these in this past week, what's been showing up for you? What have you been noticing about emotions in the wider world around you based on some of these categories? What have you noticed?
I've noticed that like the intersection of a couple of these this because I'm a former New Yorker, I'm now in Florida, but like the New York City has become overrun by Knicks fans, and it is this intersection between political emotions and sports emotions and culture emotions, and there's just an interesting blend going on that I'm
Hmm.
witnessing sort of from a distance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And you can, in a situation like that, I think you can look at it through the lens of emotions and you can say, oh, so part of the either why things are going well or why things are maybe not going so well, often what I see is it's the conflict, the challenge, the misalignment of emotions that produces that. So again, we don't think about it that way. We think about beliefs, right? We think about values. We think about being a fan. We think about et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I would say you could look underneath all of that and you could say, oh, look, so what is fueling the Knicks fans? And what is fueling the political conversations that have something to do with that? And what is fueling, any of these things? What's fueling the preoccupation with safety, right? I mean, all of that. You look underneath of that, and everywhere you look, there are emotions, and you can begin to name specific emotions. Oh, I think these are the ones that are generating this for a lot of people. For me, it's fascinating. Yeah. Other things you've
And
noticed, Jenny?
we have two Knicks fans and basketball fans in our house, and I can tell you that the emotions have gone far beyond New York, and they get even more heightened when the referees are concerned. We'll stop there. There's no more
Oh,
to say. The
okay.
ripple effect is huge.
Yeah. Yep. Then there enters skepticism,
That
cynicism,
one for sure. Yeah.
contempt, yeah, lots of, yeah, disrespect maybe once in a while.
Yeah, it was loud. It was loud, and we were nowhere near. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
huge.
So again, they're everywhere. The more we look. Melissa.
I guess I kind of reflected a little bit on in my former career as an officer, I worked a lot of like little league sports games or these organized child sports, and it
Hmm.
always absolutely blew my mind how like parents would come down the field and like fight these referees or like fight like physically fight, like they would go to jail over this. And I thought, over this little child game, and but now when I look at it through the lens of emotions, it's kind of like, it's not really, I think, about the emotions generated by the sport, but thinking about the parents, in terms of their desires for their children's success, what was standing in the way,
Yeah,
their desperation or their optimism or their pessimism or their, who knows
yeah.
what goes on. But I mean, it's truly an example of how I'm sure if you asked them on a good day, they would say, I would never behave myself like that in public. But yet, right, emotions
Yeah.
drove the day.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it is
no,
fascinating.
absolutely. Yeah, so it is interesting, isn't it? It's not even the sport that generates the emotion, it's the people's relationship with it and with each other. And I think about that with Jenny. So with her two people in her house, if I was there, my emotion would be apathy because I don't care. I don't care. Nick's I have no care, like none. I don't care. I don't care if they win. I don't care if they lose. I don't even want to know. It's like apathy. And so interesting. I get it. That's about me. That's not about the sport itself. And I think again, that's fascinating. We attribute it to something outside of us, but it's right here. It's something in us that we have a lot to do with generating based on, how we're connected, how we see things, what we believe. Jen, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I was
okay.
just thinking that it's the same with the World Cup. Like, I have no interest at all in this.
Jen, no, the World Cup is really important because Spain's gonna win. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah,
Ah,
but I'm
little
like,
loyalty, Jen.
I live here. I'm from the US. I don't have this patriotic flair of like some country's gotta kick a ball and do great things with it. But it's, what do you mean you're not interested in the World Cup? I'm like, oh, is it happening this year? Is it happening already? Like I don't even know what it
Okay,
is.
I think we have to move on because clearly Jen and I cannot have a conversation about this topic. So. But yeah, fascinating stuff, isn't it? And you're right. Absolutely. I mean, here we got Barcelona, Madrid, right? You can't like both of them. You can't. You can't like them both. So So another place I see is in the arts. Performing arts. You think about acting. Oh, well, there you go. You think about film. You think about painting. You think about music. Think about everything in the arts. Mime. Oh, certain emotions, certain specific emotions underlying that, generating that. And you have the same situation. Some people are completely apathetic about it. And it's not the art that generates the emotion. It's what it means to you, how you see it, how you're connected with it. So again, no emotions, no arts, right? And I would throw literature in there as well. History. Oh, history. I love history because we talk about all the data. Here's all the data. Here's all the information. Here's what happened. Here's the dates for me. Again, a little bit boring, like not that interesting. But wow, if we could explore the emotions that move people to do the things they did, my goodness. Now, for me, this is something quite interesting. Like, why did all those Irish immigrate to the US? Well, right, desperation. Why? Because there was a famine, et cetera, et cetera. And you can look at, again, everything in history through the lens of emotions. And I find that to be far more compelling than the dates and the times and the names of people. And I get it, that's my perspective, but you can't look at history without seeing that there's something moving people to do the things they do. Yeah. Geography. This is one I find also quite fascinating. So I used to work for a man from Chile. I spent some time in Chile. And in Chile, there's the Andes Mountains that run north and south, and they really separate it completely from not just Argentina, but the rest of South America. So Chile is really quite by itself there geographically. And that has an impact. That creates a certain mood. It creates a certain mood that people might call, isolation, but it also might provoke solitude, loneliness in a sense. But it also might provoke other moods like things that feed independence, like that, dignity. We have the right to choose for ourselves, to decide for ourselves. But again, we can look at every part of the world in terms of geography, and we can see, I think, Melissa, it's not so long since your state wanted to secede from the Union, wanted to leave the US because Texas, it'd be better on its own. Oh my gosh, but Catalonia, same thing in other parts of the world. Yeah, hey, independence, why? Well, there are emotions that provoke that. And there are emotions that have people say, no, no, we got to keep everything together. We need a federal organization, not people running off on their own. You could look at this in so many different ways. I think Vaughn lives in a place where he's surrounded by water, right, Vaughn?
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
And so you think about, well, what emotions does that provoke? What mood is provoked there where you live? And where do you live, Vaughn?
Bermuda.
Okay, in Bermuda. But what do you think the impact is? What emotional impact does it have to live on an island out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean?
Yeah, tranquility is one that
Okay,
comes.
there you
Yeah,
go. Yeah, yeah, lovely. Yeah.
and isolation from a lot of perceived craziness to the big country to the west.
Okay, so maybe a little peace, tranquility, serenity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Gender. Well, so here's how I approach this topic. I've had people, lots of people say, well, do you think men or women are better with their emotions? In some variety, they've asked me that question. And my honest answer is I don't know. I don't have any idea. And I don't even know what that means, better with our emotions. What I know from my experience is there are women who are amazingly aware emotionally, incredibly competent emotionally. And there's women I've known who are not. And there are men who are amazingly aware and amazingly competent. And there are men I've known who are not. So I don't see it as a competition, and I don't even think the comparison is particularly useful. The way I think about this is whoever I am, there's certainly work I could do. there's certainly work I could do on myself emotionally to enhance whatever it is I got because of my gender, whatever that is. But I think if we want to look at the relationship between genders, wow, lots of emotions there. Everything from men being arrogant because why? Oh, we're stronger because we have more power, blah, 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 to women feeling a sense it's at times of, worthlessness or helplessness or some other emotion. But also, vanity, pride, those show up for both, right? Maybe more in one than the other. Love, compassion, care, self-compassion. I mean, we could go on. Every emotion shows up in every human being. So get much, I don't get very excited about comparing, but what I am really interested in is looking at the dynamic. Like, what is the dynamic between us? And, one question I've thought that I've never asked anyone this, and I think this is a question we ought to be asking each other is for me to ask a woman, what is it to be a woman? I mean, tell me what it's like. I want to hear what is your experience and talk to me about your emotions. Like just the fact that you were born a woman and I was born a man, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know what that's like. And I don't think we can have that conversation enough because it's much easier for me to get a sense of, okay, how might life be for, for Vaughn, because we're both male, oh, that actually there's some things there that would be intuitive to me to understand. But on the other side, wow, there's such a chasm. There's such a vast, mm, I think there's a void there that I don't know that we can bridge. I don't know that I can bridge, but I think I can appreciate it. I think I can respect it. I think I can bring other emotions to it, even though at times it confuses me. So that's my
Dan,
position on gender. Yes,
okay,
Vaughn.
how do you react to whether the person is actually male or female to have each one say, "Oh, well, that's my male part talking," or "That's my female aspect."
Well, what I hear from people say, more they say, well, that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
And my challenge to people is, well, is that the way you are, or is that the way you've learned to be? So
Mhm.
maybe you were born that way. I don't know. I have no idea. But what I do know is a lot of the way in which we go through life emotionally, we learned. And so
Hmm.
the first place I would start is, okay, so what have you learned? Because I think it may be impossible to know exactly which parts of me I was born with, but it's a lot easier for me to identify what I might have learned emotionally and where I might have learned it. So that's the path I invite people to go down. But if somebody has the absolute belief that, well, I behave that way or I have those emotions because I'm male and there's nothing I can do with it, then okay, there's not really a conversation there to be had unless there's a little bit of curiosity. Yeah, thank you. Masoom, question?
Actually, I have something to share on what you said. So, in Hinduism, there is this concept where every human being has male and female aspect to them, like
Hmm.
Shiv and Shakti. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, I feel it is what we have seen other, like males doing or other females doing in our life. And we have in our childhood, I am saying that in our childhood, we have seen what other female are doing. Like I'm a girl, so I would see what my mother is doing, what my sister is doing, and I would adapt that emotional regulation techniques or outburst techniques from them, you know.
Yeah.
And then we grow up, we make friends, we meet our colleagues, and then we learn from them too.
Mhm.
So I feel the gender thing comes from observing people rather
Mhm.
than you are born with it, you know,
Okay.
because
Great.
everybody has both sides.
Yeah. Lovely. I will say there's two pieces to this for me, and one is how I react, respond, and behave. And I think that a lot of times does come from imitating, right? I see somebody do it. It's for me, it's quite similar to, I was in Madrid a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't ridden the metro, the subway in Madrid. So I was watching everybody around me to see, well, how do they do it? Because I was imitating them, buying tickets and opening the doors and wait, everything I was doing. I didn't have any other direction. And I have a little bit of experience, but what I was really focused on is imitating what's going on around me. That's how I was learning. And I think we do have a lot of learned behavior, but I would also say, part of it's wired into us, our sensitivity to emotions, for instance, and maybe even the range of emotions available to us. It could be there are other parts of us that have those attributes. We all have vision, right? We see things, but some of us have acute vision and some of our vision is not so good. And I used to work in a building where there was a photo lab where they did color matching of portraits. And every person who worked there except the owner was a woman. And I asked him once, so how come? And he said, because women naturally, because of the way they're wired, because of their optic system, are better at color matching than men. He said, you could train me for years and I could never do it as well as some of the people on my team. And I'm like,
Mm.
I didn't know that. I had no idea about that. And I would say that idea probably has a place with gender because, yeah, there are things, I get that. And maybe men are more inclined to this and women are more inclined to that, or men avoid this. And all I'll say is I'm not an expert at it. And I think that the place where we can make changes is with emotional literacy and regulation. So if we want to take charge of those aspects of ourselves, I think that's on the learning side. What about isms? So we talked about consumerism, but every ism. So whether it's Protestantism, consumerism, every ism, what it actually boils down to, it's a core belief that's generally quite to the radical end of things. So it's a concentration of beliefs, but that also is based on certain emotions. And it can be based on emotions like love and care and compassion, or it can be based on emotions like hate and disrespect and other emotions. So again, the fact that something is called an ism, I think, tells us something about how intense probably the emotions underlying the beliefs are. And climate change. And when we wrote this 10 years ago, climate change was not a popular, wasn't spoken about. There was much, much more skepticism about it. But I would say that even climate, think about that every choice I make has some impact on the world around me. And those choices, those decisions are all based on emotions. So, what I find interesting about climate change is we always revert to what's the technology that could save us, reverse climate change, slow down climate change. And I've never, ever heard one conversation about what are the emotions underlying the choices we're making that are leading to us changing the climate of the earth. I've never heard that conversation. And I think it's a huge missing conversation. I think without that conversation, we can't ever get to the root of it. Because why? Well, because we always believe that technology is going to take care of it. Instead of saying, well, yeah, but maybe it's the emotions. Maybe it's the emotion of ambition to have more things. Maybe it's the ambition, maybe it's the emotion of envy, right? Oh, I want to have that because oof, look how great it made Melissa's life. So she got a swimming pool. I think I need a swimming pool. Right? These emotions are what's driving us. And even Jenny, her kid's getting on a plane to New York to see the Knicks. What's that driven by? Emotions. And some of it for very good reason. You think about it. All my relatives live in the US. Somebody dies, what am I going to do? I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go to the US. Does that have an impact on the climate? Of course it does. Am I doing it for what I consider a good reason, a caring reason? Of course I am. But still, right? It's having an impact on the climate. Everything I do. And I think that's completely been left out of that conversation. I think we argue about beliefs and politics, but that's not really what we ought to be talking about if we wanted to resolve it. Yeah. So that's it for today on this. So I'd like to sum up this chapter and just hear from you. Okay. So what are you taking away from this conversation about emotions in the wide world? Yes, Johan.
So I made a couple of notes. Um, I was thinking about children in baseball, and it goes to I think sometimes the projection of the wounds of the father, the mother onto the children. The parent may have an unhealed wound, and they're forcing that upon the child. Oh, you should do this. You should be good at baseball. You should be good at sports. Because I wasn't able to fulfill that part of my destiny, my dream, I'm going to
Mhm.
put that on the child. You grow up as an adult. You take in those wounds. You don't heal those wounds. You, again, to the next generation, keep perpetuating this. So that
Mhm.
was my first thought on that, if I may. And the second is when we talk about gender, I see gender as the balance of the masculine and the feminine. And I'm looking at it from an emotional point of view. I'm looking at it maybe a spiritual point of view, a mental point of view, so that there is a balance. It's not masculine all the way to where it's
Mhm.
just aggressive. And it's not, with just the feminine where it's just passive and, oh, anything can happen. And there's that apathy, I don't care. So I'm seeing that masculine, the feminine as a balance.
Mhm.
And um, I'm also interested in the emotional frequency of each emotion. So there's an emotional, let's say, frequency that is with shame is weak and destructive. When you look at peace, it's creative and constructive and builds.
Mhm.
So I see that also as a balance. So throughout my day, I'll zoom out and say, okay, that emotion in here I'm feeling, it's not a logical exercise, but in here, this is what I'm feeling. Is that coming from a weak, destructive point of view? Then I need to go look at that. That's a nice flag for
Yeah.
me. Or is this coming from a creative, strong, and maybe I'm supporting someone else, etc. So I'll do that throughout the day and just play the role of the observer. But
Yeah.
that was my takeaway, my first thoughts on this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you, Johan. Other insights, questions, connections, thoughts, ideas? Yasmin?
Yes. So, Dan, when I was going through this chapter, I could really understand that, emotions have some role to play in leadership, art, and marketing and stuff like that. But I was really amazed to see the connection of history and geography with emotions. So I was really amazed to see. And then I reflected on the examples that we have in India. You know, North Indians have a certain mood, and people who live close to sea also have a certain mood. So that was quite an eye-opening for me. I never thought that, that history and geography can really have some effect on the kind of mood that we stay in.
Hmm.
So I really wanted to share that with this group. So
Yeah.
so
Well,
very
yeah.
amazed to see that
Thank
and
you.
observe that. And then I also went about reading a bit more about, why certain people are like this in the southern part of India and why people like that are like that in northeast part of India. So
Yeah.
it was really amazing
Yeah.
to
Lovely.
read that and
Lovely.
observe.
Yep. Yeah, what I find is I find it fascinating to see the influences. And I don't see it so much as cause and effect, but I do see like, oh, isn't that interesting how this group tends to be that way. Not that everybody is, but it's a like you say, well, there's some emotional energy there. There's a mood with this group of people or that group. But I see it again too in families, and we can look everywhere and we can see that if we choose that lens. And I'm not saying we always should. I'm not sure it's healthy to always be looking through that lens, but once in a while, it's quite fascinating to do that.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you, Yasmin. What are the rest of you thinking? You're all there noodling something. I know. You're having emotions. I can see it. I know you're having emotions. So, yeah.
My emotions are being a bit of an outlier. This is my first time with this group, and I haven't done the reading. So, in Dan and I have known each other for going on 15 years. So I felt comfortable in just jumping in today, but I
Yeah,
certainly would like to catch up and I guess do the readings and be not so much an outlier.
beautiful. Well, I appreciate your boldness and your trust to just show up and share. And we can always have other conversations too, but I will include the link for all the past sessions so you can watch them if you want. You can read the
Thank,
book, and I'm
thank you.
always open to have a conversation. So,
Thank you for thinking it was boldness.
well, maybe it wasn't, but that's what I'm going to name it for today. If you want to argue with me, you can tell
I'll
me what
take
it
that.
really
No.
was, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're right though. We can't know. So I'm making a big assumption here, but that was my guess. So thank you
Good
all.
guess. Good guess.
Yash.
Yeah. So I guess Dan, the thing that truly amazed me is the that everything we do in life basically boils down to a choice. We always have a choice, and now I'm learning that emotions affect our choices. So the choices that we make later impact maybe you can say history, art, or any other aspect of life. So I'm assuming that every aspect of our life then boils down to emotions because emotions makes us choose something. So
Yeah.
that was a really interesting insight for me.
Well, yeah. And they also make us not choose things.
That's right. Mhm.
So that's the other thing I see. We always talk about emotions being the energy that moves us, but it's also the energy that keeps us from moving sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's worth remembering that sometimes emotions, both helpful and unhelpful, are what keep me from doing things sometimes. And that can be enormously important. So lovely. All right, let's hear a couple of more, and then I have a conclusion for today. But Masum?
Yeah, so basically, whenever I make some choice, I I think that I make it on the basis of my morals rather than emotions.
Hmm.
So are morals affected by emotions,
Yeah.
or you know, are morals affecting our emotions? What is the way?
Yeah. So it's a great area to explore, but tell me or tell us when you say moral, what's a moral to you? What is to be moral? What does that mean to you?
So, like for me, morals are basically black and white, you know. Emotions cannot be black and white.
Hmm.
Emotions are just there.
Uh-huh.
But morals are this is right, this is wrong, this is
Okay.
the way to go, this is not
Okay.
the way to go,
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Well, I would say one interesting thing about emotions is just because we call something an emotion doesn't mean it's not also a moral stance or a belief or a behavior. It can be all of those things. So when we say something like an emotion like anger, what I would say anger is, it's when I encounter something I think is morally wrong. It's wrong morally that that's happening. And so that for me is what provokes anger. So I would say there's a clear connection between some very specific emotions and some very specific moral positions or beliefs or perspectives. But I think more broadly, I think, yeah, probably all morals, if we looked at them, if we looked underneath of them, that we would find, several emotions, both on both sides. Like, what is it? What are the emotions that make something correct, and what are the emotions that make something incorrect? But there's also, rules and behaviors and norms, and there's lots of other aspects of this. So for me, I just find it clarifying to look through the lens of emotions at what's happening, and then to ask the question you asked. Okay, so are my morals based on certain emotions or not? Or how are they connected with my emotions? Because I would argue that the more you learn about your emotions and the more you learn about your morals, the better you'll understand yourself, because that's you. That's how you see the world. That's how you respond to the world. So for me, they're all worth investigating. It's just that I happen to like emotions, and I'm not as drawn to investigating morals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, Jen, and then we'll summarize. Jen.
I really love what you just said about some emotions move you and some emotions stop you. And you and I, thank you again for the call that you and I had privately off group. But that's also been like, there's a red light and a green light, and I could do, if it's this kind of conversation that I'm going to have with somebody, I can take a little bit of context of, I'm coming into it with these sets of emotions and designing the talk around that. I'm expecting that this person's going to have this kind of reaction and can use perhaps whatever emotions show up in that conversation. And then the context of like the rest of the world, right? Because you're never just entering your own little bubble. There's your little bubble, their little bubble, whatever just happened all around each other. But this is like, it always sometimes, it feels so big sometimes, but it's also, it can stop us in a good way. Like, oh, I don't need to engage with anger if I can be more tolerant. Like if I can come in with a different emotions. I just was writing that down and then pulling out, like what I've been doing now is when I go into conversations, I'm using your Amoli cards and just saying, they're right in front of me. These are the ones that I'm going to stay grounded in, regardless of what else is happening in the world or the other person's
Yeah.
response to that. It's been super helpful to think of these multiple layers
Yeah.
of things.
And I think what you're doing is exactly how we build our emotional literacy. Like we say, okay, what are the ones that are helpful? How do I focus on those? How do I maintain those? Oh, what are the emotions in that person? I used this analogy before in our conversation, but I'm going to use it again because I think it's so appropriate, is that when we're learning emotions at the beginning, for me, it's like when we were learning to drive. Right? There's lots of rules. There's lots of gauges and instruments. There's lots of people. There's dogs. There's cars. There's stoplights. There's so much going on. There's so much stimulation that we really never paid attention to before because we were a passenger or we were in the back seat, so we didn't even need to. But then when we sit in the driver's seat and we're responsible, now things get really interesting. And what I see is that at first, when we're learning to drive, and it could be lots of other activities too, but driving has so many uh, complexities or sources of stimulation. And at first, we don't know where to put our attention. We don't know what's most important. We know what the driving instructor told us, right? Okay, we got that part. We got some guidance. But we have to learn on our own. We have to practice. We have to, hone that. And sometimes it's really uncomfortable. And sometimes we make a mistake. And sometimes we even have an accident, right? So it's not so different with emotions. At first we will be awkward. We will be uncertain. We will be confused sometimes because, oh my gosh, once we start seeing them, they're everywhere. And at first, to be able to filter that is quite challenging because we've never had to do that before. So, one of the invitations I make to people is, I think the two most valuable emotions for you to learn emotionally, one is self-compassion. I'm a beginner. You know what? I never thought about it this way before. I don't have the articulation. I don't even know how to name what's going on with me. I don't know whether it's a feeling or an emotion, and all that's fine. But I think self-compassion, giving yourself permission to be a beginner, really important. And two is perseverance, not persistence, perseverance, where we go looking for a way to understand this. And I always think of perseverance and persistence being like persistence is I just knock on the front door, waiting for somebody to answer, right? And I'll stay there knocking on the front door for hours. But what's perseverance? I go around the back to see if they're having a barbecue. I go around the back to see if somebody's in the kitchen, right? I look for another way to get in. I look for another way to connect with the person I came to visit. So for me, those are the two that I would say are more helpful than any others that I can think of. And this is a great point because emotions are at the core of learning, right? Is that some emotions allow us to learn, some emotions allow us to learn better, faster, more deeply, and some emotions keep us from learning. And emotions help us learn emotions if we select ones that do that. So thank you. Great. So you might have gotten to the conclusion of the book, and you might have noticed it's only a page and a half. And you might have thought, wow. Well, I thought there'd be more to it than this. Well, to be honest, when we got to this point, we kind of felt like we'd said everything we needed to say. So we thought we're just going to conclude. So I'd like to read it if I could. So the conclusion, not a moment passes that we are not experiencing an emotion. Nothing we do or don't do happens without the energy of emotions. Just as our hearts beat without interruption, whether we are aware of it or not, so emotions flow through each of us. And just as we often take our hearts for granted, we often don't realize the fundamental importance of our emotions. We wrote this book with the idea that it might help you become aware, to notice, pay attention to, and learn about something that is a part of you and a constant companion. Emotions can be one of our most important assets or tools, and one that enriches every part of life when we develop an understanding and appreciation of them. The stories we have learned that emotions are not useful, in the way, capricious, arbitrary, or something to be ashamed of no longer serve us. It is time to look again and accept the gift that has been waiting for us. Lucy and I wish you an amazing journey into emotional awareness and literacy. If yours is anything like ours, it will have its moments of wonder and also of terror. You may begin to mark your progress through all the emotions you experience and befriend even when that is uncomfortable. As you journey in this land of emotions, you will begin to understand things about yourself that you never understood before. Other people will begin to make more sense. And in many ways, the world will become simpler. Eventually, you will have the opportunity to share what you have learned with others. When that happens, a new understanding of emotions will spread, as has linguistic literacy. One day, we believe emotional literacy will become common sense in the way that reading and writing have for the vast majority of humans. And the world will be a place where things are possible that never were before. That's our dream. Oof. So, thank you. For me, it's been a great journey. Uh, you know what? Sometimes I forget what we did 10 years ago. I don't know if you journal, but probably don't remember everything you wrote 10 years ago. So, great stuff to revisit. And some things I change now after 10 years of thinking about this and talking about this and reflecting on this. So to be complete, what what would you say? What would bring completion for you to this journey through the unopened gift?
This book was indeed a gift for me, is what I would say in the end. And I'm just loving opening this gift slowly, pace by pace. I'm just loving it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yasmin.
And I guess I'm just getting started or reconnecting. So I'm at a different point in all of this. As many of you are saying thank you for what's happened, I'm saying I'm excited about getting involved. So I'm in a different place. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Vaughn.
I like what you said at the end, Dan, about the two emotions that are helpful in helping our own journey, the self-compassion and the perseverance. It's just a great reminder of things that can help sort of buoy us or bolster us as we fumble through.
Yeah.
In some cases, fumble through. And yeah, and to Yasmin's point, I like that we were able, that you gave us the gift of like a slow pace because the world is so fast already. And it was just nice to sort of savor it.
Thank you, Brenda.
Um,
Joe.
I would I would bring back the poem of Rumi that, and this is something that Melissa also says very often, that um, emotions are guests in our house. And yeah, and if I recollect it is be grateful for them, because each one is sent to guide us, and some are welcome, like Melissa says, and some are welcome for a short duration. But then we have to tell them that it's time for you to leave.
Yeah,
Yeah. So this whole reading completes that poem for me.
super. Thank you, Joe.
I really like the simple summation of emotional regulation literacy. I know the book says it's about emotional literacy, but I really believe that you were able to kind of sum up the four skill sets in the book. I find myself recommending it to people who are new to this journey, and I think it's just really good. I read it after I'd become more familiar with the journey than that, and so it just really struck me just how, like I said, how simple it is to understand and how accessible it is. So I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Melissa.
I think in line with that, with what Melissa just said, it is the gift that keeps on giving. And we're so grateful. To your point, it doesn't matter which way we turn, this is a gift. And it's now open. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny.
Was
Masoom?
recently asked to
Oh,
gather material to present soft. What are the soft topics that I would present? And I really appreciate the focus, and not that you have to categorize it as a hard topic, but I appreciate the focus that these things that we call emotions and are experiencing have wrecked cultures, families, and provided the energy necessary for the culture to sustain itself. Yet we focus on the hard skills. And so I appreciate a focus on the soft skills that are changing people's lives and transforming companies to be more effective. So that's just my limited exposure
yeah.
perspective.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you. Masoom?
Yeah, so the biggest takeaway from this book club is that I have a structure to my emotions. Now that I can identify them, I can bifurcate them. I know what are emotions and what are not emotions. So now it is very easy for me to navigate through them.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was the biggest takeaway, and it has sorted my life so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I will
Yeah.
send out everything I always send out. I'm also going to include a screenshot of the calendar for dignity and leadership. So it'll show you the week. And so it has about 15 chapters. So we're going to be working with that for a while. So we're going to start on the 23rd. Marcel will be part of those conversations. So I will send that to you. I'll send you the link for where can you find everything we've already done. And next week, what I'd like to do is go through the dictionary section at the back, the table with all the emotions, and just share with you where that came from and why we did it the way we did it. And if there's any specific emotions you want to talk about, have a look. We can talk about those. And after that, we'll be concluded with the unopened gift until next time, because we'll probably do this again one day. So. But finally, I'm always open for a conversation. So if anybody says there's something they'd like to have a conversation about, let me know. We'll find a time. So thank you. It's always a delight to see you. Thanks for being here and being part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Have a great evening wherever you are. It'll come eventually. So have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Much. Bye bye.